Hey everyone, and welcome to my first round recap from the Madrid Chess Festival. If you missed my announcements video, I am playing a 10-player round robin in Madrid, and this was the first game. I finished about an hour ago, and I was playing fellow international master Alex Garrido Outon from Spain. And coming into this game, I was expecting e4, and he did not surprise me. He played e4. And I opted for the Sicilian after c5, knight f3, e6. He went for open Sicilian, and I chose to play the Taimanov variation, which is basically the combination of e6, knight c6, and queen c7. And this is an opening that I've been playing for at least 15 years now. It's one of my go-to openings from the black side against e4. And it can lead to a lot of very dynamic positions from early on. And I thought that I might as well try and have an interesting battle to start the tournament. Now, I had checked my opponent's games in the Taimanov in the weeks leading up to today, and I saw that he's played a variety of things, mainly bishop e3 and g3, but he surprised me with his move in this position. Let me disable the arrows so I'm not having any spoilers. But the move he played was knight c to b5. And this is a move that has been pretty trendy recently. It was pretty much unknown until about a year ago. Grandmaster Ray Robson played this in the World Cup. He won a nice game against Grandmaster Alexander Fier. And in the same tournament in the World Cup, Vidit played this against Black Crow. Now, I am familiar with this move because I actually played this myself in Qatar in my last classical tournament in October, and I played this from the white side. And my opponent had told me after the game that he only discovered that I played this from the white side yesterday, but he still chose to go for this, and it's a move that basically leads to a pretty fresh position. There's not so much theory that's developed around this move, but there have been some high-level players playing this recently. Now, the point of knight c b5, of course, is to attack the queen, but it also over-defends a knight on d4. And the point is, after I play queen b8, white can play bishop to d3 because the knight on d4 is defended, and even though the queen is obstructed, white's not losing any material. Now, if we compare this to this position, white can't put the bishop on d3 because the knight would be hanging. So knight c b5, it's just a way to get the bishop to kind of a natural developing square. And yeah, after I play knight f6, he castles, I play a6, he then takes on c6, takes, and then retreats. And even though it seems like white lost a couple tempi moving the knight back and forth, I really haven't completed my development, and arguably white is ahead in development, having two minor pieces developed and castled. But it's kind of a double-edged position because I have a pawn that's taken towards the center, and I'm able to play pawn d5 now, and really just try and take over the center with my pawns. Now he responds with queen e2, keeping the tension, and I play bishop to e7, preparing to castle, and then he plays pawn to b3. And this is a structure that I have a decent amount of experience in. There's a lot of different sort of Taimanov lines that leads to this sort of structure, with black having the pawns like this and white having the pawn on e4. And b3 is a pretty smart move. It just makes sure that the queen is not causing any issues on the b file. And sometimes white does like to put the bishop on b2. Now I go for castling here. And rather than playing bishop to b2, my opponent played bishop to d2. And he played this really quickly, so I assumed that he was still in preparation. And he told me after the game that he was, yeah, this is pretty much the extent of his preparation. Bishop on d2, it's really aimed to connect the rooks, and then eventually build up with like rook ae1 and f4, and we're going to see these moves come pretty quickly. So I start with rook e8 here. I figured that the rook is useful on the same file as a queen. There might be some ideas of playing e5, and it's also useful for black to free the f8 square, because there's cases where if white plays e5 and I play knight to d7, then I either want to put a bishop or knight on f8 to keep my king safe. So he didn't play e5. He starts with rook ae1. I play bishop to b7. And I was trying to stay flexible, even though the bishop doesn't look so happy here, just staring at this pawn chain. There are eventual ideas of playing pawn c5 and making the bishop useful in the position. And the reason why I didn't start with pawn c5 right away was because if I start with bishop to b7, and let's say he plays pawn e5 here, then there's an idea to put the knight on d7 and then reroute it to c5. And I wouldn't be able to do that if my pawn were on c5. So for example, if pawn f4, I think knight c5 would be really nice, essentially forcing the trade of knight for bishop, and then later black can expand with c5. So yeah, he didn't play pawn e5. He played pawn to f4, and the tension remains in the center. And I took some time here because I wasn't so comfortable with my options. Like originally, I did want to play pawn c5, but then he can play pawn e5, and after knight d7, there's this move pawn f5. And I realized that, yeah, I don't really want to go for this position because it seems like my king side is quite vulnerable. White has ideas of pawn f6 and yeah, queen h5, even taking, and it seems like some pieces are just stuck on the queen side. So I decided to go for a more kind of liquidating line, starting with taking. And even though this does ruin my structure, because now I have these two isolated pawns on the queen side, after he takes back, I am able to open the diagonal for my bishop. And I thought that, yeah, even though I'm kind of accepting worse pawn structure, at least I have some activity with the bishop, which basically turned from my worst piece into one of my best pieces. Now, he played a pretty aggressive move in response, this move knight to g5, and white still has attacking potential on the king side. And with this move, it seemed like he's threatening knight takes f7. And I think I have to be careful here, because if I play something like h6 and knight takes f7 and king takes f7 and queen takes e6, then yeah, things could go downhill really quickly for black. We should note that bishop g6 looks winning, but there's bishop to d5. But I was calculating bishop c4, and then, yeah, I don't see a great way for black to stop mate. So, yeah, I definitely had some danger levels here, and rather than, yeah, provoking knight takes f7, I played the move queen to d6, just reinforcing e6, trying to make sure that white doesn't have any nasty sacrifices. And from here, he plays bishop to c3. So yeah, getting the bishops in prime position for attacking. And then I play h6, and he plays bishop to e5, counterattacking my queen. I played queen to b6, and I thought that maybe white could be in a small predicament here, because I'm threatening to play pawn c4 to discover check and win the bishop, and the knight is still attacked by my pawn. But he very simply responded with pawn to c4. And it turns out that I just can't take his knight on g5. If I do take it, then I think black is in a world of hurt here, because yeah, my knight's attacked. If I move the knight, then queen h5. And yeah, even though black is up a piece, I think black is just losing here. I mean, queen h7 is a maiden 2 threat. And yeah, I did not want to go into this. So yeah, the knight on g5, it just stays there even though it's attacked by the pawn, and it's pretty much untakeable. So I just went ahead and improved with rook a d8, grabbing the open file, and he plays bishop to b1. And it seemed like we were kind of at a standstill because I didn't want to take the knight. And yeah, he's just playing this kind of slow improving move. The bishop is a bit more useful on b1. He maybe has ideas of queen c2 to eventually create the battery. But yeah, I kept improving. I played queen c6. The queen didn't really serve any more purpose on b6. I figured why not create the battery and make sure that white's queen is tied down to defending the g2 pawn. And from this position, I was expecting him to play knight to f3 to then eventually reroute the knight to e5. but he had different ideas in mind. And he started with very interesting move, bishop to a1. And I was not expecting this move at all, but this prompted me to take a very, very long think. Because his idea with bishop a1 is he's preemptively clearing the e5 square, and now he has the idea of playing knight f3 and knight e5. And I mean, originally I wanted to play rook d7 to double up on the d file, but then knight f3 would threaten the fork against my queen and rook. And when he played bishop a1, I just spent a long time trying to determine whether I could actually take his knight on g5. Like, I wasn't sure if he was bluffing me or if the tactics still work out for white. This is different than the line I showed earlier because after takes and takes, it seems like there are some options for my knight to move. I was mainly calculating knight to h5 with the idea that he can't take my knight because then I just checkmate. But it turns out that pretty sure white has still a very strong attack. I spent a lot of time calculating rook takes f7, which I'm pretty sure is good for white, because if I take, then he can take with check. But after the game, we were analyzing, and white actually just has a pretty clear win here, assuming the calculations are correct. White can play bishop h7 check, and okay, I can't take the bishop because after takes, king g8 takes, I'm just getting mated. And if I don't take the bishop and play king to h8, then what were we concluding? Oh, then white has a very strong move, which I actually didn't see during the game, but my opponent told me after that, yeah, bishop e4 is pretty much winning on the spot because now the battery is obstructed and he's threatening to take the knight with forced mate. And at first it looks like I can take, and then after takes, there's queen h7, but this is white to move, and white has forced mate in this position. Feel free to pause the video if you want to find it. The move is bishop takes g7, and black is just falling apart. If I don't take the bishop, I get mated instantly, and if I take the bishop, I also get mated pretty instantly. So again, the knight really can't be taken, and after a very long think, I chose to go for simplification, and I took the pawn on g2. Now, I took about half hour to play this move, but the point is I'm forcing the queen trade, and after takes on g2, bishop takes g2, king takes g2, a lot of pieces are coming off the board, and I figured that, yeah, even though it looks scary with white having these two half-open files and these sniper bishops on b1 and a1, it seems like black is surviving here. And I start with the move knight to h5. And after g6, I play rook to d2 check. And at this point, I thought momentum was kind of shifting in my favor because white can't really block the check. If rook f2, I would take and then bishop h4, and black is winning material. And yeah, this is probably just a winning position for black. So my opponent played king h3, and at this point, I played the move bishop to f6. And after bishop f6, I thought everything is under control for black because I'm obstructing the rook on the f-file. And if takes, I can just take back with the king. And yeah, even though the bishop is pinned, everything in the position is defended. And eventually the bishops should be traded. And there's ideas of rook h8. So I was calculating lines like this, and I thought maybe even black has the upper hand after bishop f6. But once I played this move, my opponent started thinking, and he came up with just an absolutely brilliant response that I had completely overlooked. And I think this is a great tactical exercise for anyone that wants to pause the video and try and find the move white played in this position. Feel free to do so. But the star move of the game, and I think the winning move of the game, is rook to e5. And it's one of these moves that is just so easy to not even consider. Like at first, it seems like the rook can't go here because the bishop is controlling the square. But of course, my bishop is pinned to the pawn on f7, and I can't take the rook because takes, and white is cleaning up material. White would take, and then take, and then take, and be up a piece. And the big problem for black after rook e5 is my knight is attacked and it's basically trapped. It can't move backwards and it can't really move forwards either. And yeah, the more I thought in this position, the more I realized that black's position is pretty hopeless. Now, I tried to keep fighting, and I was mainly deciding between rook f8 or g takes f6. I was close to playing g takes f6, or sorry, f takes g6, but after bishop takes, I think black is just losing material. I was calculating rook f8 here. What was I calculating? I was calculating bishop takes e5, and then takes, and then knight f6. But I think this leads to a winning position for white after takes, rook f8, and bishop g5. And yeah, if takes, I calculated this and I assumed that, okay, white should be winning with the bishop pair here. So I opted for the other line, which was rook f8 immediately, thinking that maybe there's some counterplay after takes, and then takes, and then takes, and then takes. But unfortunately, white has a pretty clean way to win material with the move bishop h7 check, and my bishop on a1 is attacked. And yeah, I'm just losing a piece here. I had seen this position from a distance and thought that, okay, my rooks are active, white's pieces are maybe a bit misplaced, but I didn't really have much after king to g4. Rook f2 and bishop e4. The bishop centralizes. There's no rook g2 check. And we played on a few more moves. I tickled the bishop. Bishop came to f3. I took a pawn. And then my opponent took a pawn. And yeah, I think his technique was very clean here. And then he sets up the mating attack. I gave a check, king f4, rook f6, and king e3. And I threw in the towel here. I mean, what to do? I'm down a bishop, and yeah, white's about to checkmate me. So it was a tough start to the tournament, losing the first game, but big kudos to my opponent for just keeping the pressure on the whole game. I think he just had a nice opening, a nice middle game, and yeah, the pressure finally got to me, both in the position and on the clock. Now, I do want to go back and just see what the key moments were according to the engine. And around here, yeah, let's go to this position. So I played rook d2. Engine says rook d2 is slight inaccuracy, but in this position, I mean, bishop f6 was really the big blunder. Apparently, rook f8 was the move I should have played to try and keep some sort of equality. It's still not easy for black. I mean, white has a lot of pressure, and yeah, the bishops, even though they're pretty much in the corner, they're doing a lot of work from a distance. So yeah, after bishop f6 and rook e5, okay, the engine is saying I should have taken on g6. Let's just look at this line. I was calculating this, takes knight f6, takes rook f8. I guess the engine says that black has some chances to hold this, but yeah, after rook f2, black is winning a2, but I think white is still in prime position here. I guess actually the only winning move for white, if we had entered this position, because black is threatening to play rook b2 and win the pawn. So the only move for white to keep a winning advantage is bishop e8 to reroute the bishop to a4. And if white can do this, then yeah, eventually the c5 pawn should be lost and two bishops will overpower the rook. So anyway, yeah, very interesting game. Probably a lot more to analyze with the engine, but I'm gonna wrap it up here. It was a long day. I did have a video feed of the game, and it was broadcast to my Twitch channel, and I plan to do that for every round. And there will be guest commentators taking over my Twitch channel. Today it was Jonathan Trantz, aka Vampire Chicken. Tomorrow it will be Gary, goes by Grandmaster Gary on Twitch. So stay tuned. And yeah, round two starts in about 12 hours from now. So I'm going to get some food and some rest. And hopefully I can come back strong tomorrow. See you guys soon.